Welcome to the Finglimpse podcast, where we analyze the world of business, finance, and the economy. We cover the latest market news, economic trends, and some interesting businesses. As a standard disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Always do your own research. Now, let's get started.
So have you ever had that feeling, that nagging frustration, looking at your notes, maybe a half-finished project,
Yeah.
and, you've read so much, taken in all this info, but
Yeah.
somehow that paper, that brilliant idea, it just isn't clicking.
Yeah, it's like you're learning constantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the knowledge isn't quite connecting. It's not transforming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or turning into something new. And the advice we often get, well, it feels a bit off, doesn't it? Like writing is this separate, isolated skill you just do after all the real work is done.
Right. Compartmentalized.
Yeah. So today we're going to dig into something that honestly challenges that whole idea. A pretty simple truth from Niklas Luhmann, the sociologist.
A legendary one, yeah.
He said, one cannot think without writing. And that just completely reframes things, doesn't it?
It really does. It means writing isn't just the output, it's the process. It's how you actually think, how you learn, how you understand.
Okay, so that's a big claim.
It is.
Yeah.
And it forces us to challenge some common assumptions straight away.
Right.
Well, like the idea that pure brain power, raw intellect, is the main driver of academic or creative success.
Right, that genius is everything.
Exactly. But the research is surprising. Above a certain IQ, maybe around 120, there isn't actually a strong link between a higher IQ and better academic results.
Really. So what does make the difference?
Self-discipline. That's what consistently shows up across the board.
Okay, self-discipline makes sense.
But there's a catch, right? Willpower, that force we use to make ourselves do things, it's limited.
Like a muscle that gets tired.
Precisely. Studies show it depletes, pretty quickly. So constantly pushing yourself through sheer effort, it's just not sustainable long term.
So that's the big question then.
Yeah. If willpower runs out, how do you keep going? How do you sustain that intense intellectual effort without, constantly flogging yourself?
And that is exactly the puzzle we're unpacking today. We're looking at the workflow, the note-taking techniques that let Niklas Luhmann, this brewer's son, become incredibly prolific.
70 books, almost 600 articles. It's staggering.
It really is. And his secret. He actually said, I never force myself to do anything I don't feel like. Whenever I am stuck, I do something else.
Which sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't it? Like, how is that even possible with that kind of output?
Right. So let's unpack this. This idea that maybe the traditional ways we learn and write are missing something fundamental.
Okay.
We're taught writing as this separate step. Do your research, gather facts, then write.
Yeah, the linear model.
And that leads straight to that fear, that
Yeah.
myth of the blank page.
Exactly, the blank page. And it's not just scary, it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding, as Armin Nassihi put it,
A misunderstanding of what?
of how good writing actually happens. It's not magic, it's rooted in good note-taking. I mean, think about it.
Okay.
Getting something you've already wrestled with, already written down, into another piece of writing, that's way, way easier than trying to pull it all fresh from your brain.
Right. Your brain isn't really built for perfect recall of details like that.
No, it's a terrible archive for that kind of thing. It's great for connections, for ideas, but not for storing precise wording or complex data perfectly.
So the key isn't necessarily being smarter, but having a better system, overarching workflow.
That's it. It's not just about having tools or making rigid plans. Luhmann found that a good structure, a good system, is something you can trust.
Trust to do what?
To hold the information, to manage the complexity. It takes that huge burden of remembering everything off your shoulders.
So it frees up your mental energy.
Exactly. It frees your mind to focus on the important stuff. The content, the argument, the actual ideas.
That sounds like it could lead to that feeling of flow.
Precisely. That state Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talked about where you're just so absorbed you lose track of time.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the system works, when ideas and insights start to pull you forward instead of you always having to push.
It reminds me a bit of David Allen's Getting Things Done, GTD. That's huge in the business world.
Right. GTD is very effective for a certain kind of task.
The whole mind like water idea, capturing everything so you can focus.
Yes, capturing tasks, processing them, having clear next steps. It's brilliant for managing concrete projects and actions.
But you're saying it doesn't quite work for writing? for insight.
Well, here's the fascinating part. The nature of the task really dictates the system. GTD relies on clear goals, defined outcomes, concrete next steps.
Oh, yeah.
But insight, creative work, it's messy, it's nonlinear, you can't schedule an aha moment.
Huh. No, you definitely can't put that on a to-do list.
Right. Sometimes you need to jump between small tweaks and big picture thinking. GTD isn't really designed for that kind of exploratory, unpredictable process.
But there is something we can take from GTD, isn't there?
Absolutely. Alan's core insight about the holistic perspective is crucial, meaning
Okay.
tools are only good if they're part of a well-thought-out process. It's not just about the Flipbox or the software or whatever. It's how everything works together.
Having the right tools and knowing how to use them as part of a larger workflow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Seamlessly integrated.
Okay, so that makes sense. It's about the whole system. So how do we build that? What are the foundational principles behind Luhmann's approach?
Right, let's get into those. The first one sounds a bit extreme. Writing is the only thing that matters.
Okay, that does sound extreme. Does that mean just write constantly?
Not necessarily about quantity. It's about approaching everything else differently. Your reading, lectures, discussions, do it all with the clear purpose of writing about it.
Ah, so it changes your engagement?
Fundamentally,
Yeah.
it forces you to engage much more deeply. You have to think critically, translate ideas, practice deliberately, like Anders Ericsson talked about.
So if you approach everything like you're going to write about it, how does that change things for you, the learner?
Well, you start automatically sorting good arguments from weak ones because you're trying to rephrase them, connect them.
Okay.
You learn more efficiently because you have to elaborate on the meaning to put it in your own words. That really helps memory and understanding.
So even if you never publish anything.
Exactly. Even if it's just for yourself, your thinking gets sharper. You're building and testing your own understanding constantly.
Okay, principle 1, write to think. What's next?
Principle 2, simplicity is paramount.
Simplicity. We like simple, but sometimes simple ideas face resistance, right? Like that story of the shipping container.
Precisely. Malcolm McLean's container, just a standard box, but it revolutionized global trade.
But people resisted at first.
Oh yeah. Why repack perfectly loaded cargo into these awkward boxes? It seemed inefficient initially because it disrupted existing routines.
Okay, so how does that relate to notes?
The Slipbox, Luhmann's system, is like the shipping container for ideas. It standardizes information. Everything goes into the same format, same place, streamed towards one goal. Insight you can use, potentially publish.
Unlike, say, keeping notes filed by topic.
Right. Topic-based systems get messy fast, harder to see connections. The Slipbox, because it's based on connections, actually gets more valuable as it grows, more interconnected.
So the simplicity isn't about it being easy up front.
No, it's about a smarter design, a redesign of the whole workflow, really.
Got it. Principle 3.
Nobody ever starts from scratch.
This tackles that pick a topic, plan, then write advice.
Exactly. That linear approach most study guides push, it's just wrong for insightful writing. Writing isn't linear.
So if you find yourself brainstorming from a blank slate,
It probably means you haven't been writing along the way. Ideas mostly come from outside reading, talking, listening.
right?
You need to capture those and engage with them through writing as they come. The system then guides you based on your actual interests and connections, not some plan you made up before you really knew anything.
It sounds more organic, letting the ideas lead.
It is much more discovery-oriented.
Okay, and the final principle.
Principle 4, let the work carry you forward.
Explain that, like getting momentum.
Yeah. Think about tasks that drain you versus tasks that energize you. Some work, once you start, seems to generate its own energy, pulling you along. That's what we want.
Instead of relying on willpower or external rewards.
Right. External rewards are fragile. They don't last. The goal is to make the work itself intrinsically rewarding.
Like that fitness coach, Michelle Segar.
Exactly. She found focusing on satisfying, repeatable experiences worked way better than pushing willpower. Once people enjoyed the activity, motivation took care of itself.
So designing your work to be rewarding eliminates the need for constant self-discipline.
To a large extent, yes. It taps into intrinsic motivation. And a huge part of that is feedback.
Feedback loops, like Carol Dweck's growth mindset.
Precisely. We're motivated when we see progress, when we feel we're getting better. Linear writing offers too few, too infrequent feedback points.
So you don't learn quickly if something's not working.
Right. A good system gives you constant small feedback loops. It helps you adapt. Success often comes from building these smart environments that just avoid resistance in the first place.
Okay, these 4 principles, right to think, keep it simple, don't start from scratch, let the work pull you its scent. They paint a really different picture.
Yeah.
So how do we do it? What are the practical steps?
Right, let's get practical. The first focus area is on separate and interlocking tasks.
Tackling that modern attention deficit problem,
Yeah.
we feel so scattered.
We really do. And studies, even unpublished ones about email, suggest task switching hammers productivity, even lowers effective IQ temporarily. Media sound bites get shorter. We're training ourselves for distraction.
So multitasking is a myth.
Pretty much. Psychologists found that people who think they're good multitaskers are often actually worse at managing multiple things. It's not doing things in parallel. It's rapid, tiring switching.
So constantly switching tasks actually makes us worse at focusing? Is that the implication?
That seems to be the case. It fatigues the mechanisms involved in switching and filtering.
Okay, so how do we fight that? How do we focus?
One key is to get closure. Our working memory, the mental blackboard, is tiny. Maybe 4 to 7 items, tops.
Right.
If it's cluttered with unfinished things, nagging thoughts, there's no room for deep focus.
So you need to offload those thoughts.
Exactly, into a trustworthy external system, like the slip box. Knowing it's captured safely lets your mind release it.
Like Obama or Gates wearing the same suits.
Yeah.
Producing decisions.
Same principle. Save your limited decision-making energy, your focus, for what truly matters. Offload the rest to a system or routine.
Okay, so getting closure helps focus. What else?
This leads to the idea of becoming an expert instead of a planner.
Meaning, don't plan?
Not quite. Meaning, recognize that complex writing isn't just conscious planning, it's an art. It involves intuition, embodied experience.
So no single linear plan will work for everyone or every project.
Right. You need flexibility. You develop an expert intuition about what the next productive step is in this specific moment, rather than rigidly following a predefined map.
Okay, focus on one task, get closure, be flexible. Next step.
Next, focus on read for understanding.
Back to Benjamin Franklin. Read with pen in your hand.
Exactly. But not just highlighting or copying, it's about dialogue. Translating the author's ideas into your words right away.
Preparing it to be connected to your other thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this actively fights confirmation bias.
How so?
Think of Darwin. He made a special point of writing down any fact that contradicted his theories immediately.
Because those are the ones you tend to forget or ignore.
Precisely. A good system encourages you to seek out disagreement because that's where the interesting new connections often lie. It becomes exciting, not threatening.
This sounds like it helps you get the gist, too.
Absolutely. It's deliberate practice in sorting relevant from irrelevant, and crucially, building those mental models Charlie Munger talks about.
The lattice work of theory.
Yeah. Facts are useless if they don't hang together on some kind of conceptual structure. Reading this way helps you build that structure.
And it tests your understanding.
Definitely. Richard Feynman had that great test.
Yeah.
Can you explain it simply?
If you can't say it clearly, you don't understand it yourself.
Exactly. Writing a permanent note for your future self in your own words is that test. Just rereading feels like learning, but it can be illusory, the mere exposure effect.
You feel familiar, but you can't actually explain it.
Right. Writing forces the confrontation. You have to choose. Feel smarter or actually become smarter by identifying and filling the gaps.
Okay, so read actively, write to understand. This leads to the core, right? Take smart notes.
This is the heart of the workflow. 3 basic types of notes.
Okay, what are they?
First, fleeting notes. Just quick reminders, ideas jotted down anywhere. On napkins, phone apps, whatever. Just capture them.
Get them out of your head.
Yes. Second, literature notes. When you read something important, make a brief note in your own words about the argument or key points. Keep it with a bibliographic info. Be brief.
Okay. Fleeting, literature, and the third.
Permanent notes. These are the core. You take your fleeting notes and literature notes, think about them, and translate them into well-formed ideas written as if for publication.
In your own words.
Absolutely. 1 idea per note. Clear, concise. And crucially, you then file this note in your slip box by connecting it to other relevant notes already in there. You build links.
So it's about the connections, not just collecting notes.
It's all about the connections. Which brings up a fascinating point about memory. Remember Solomon Cheryshev?
The man who couldn't forget.
Yes. Studied by Luria, his perfect memory was actually a huge problem. He couldn't grasp the gist, couldn't think abstractly, couldn't filter relevance. He was overwhelmed.
Wow. So forgetting is actually important.
Systematic forgetting, active inhibition, is just as crucial for thinking as remembering is. You need to filter, to generalize.
So the slip box isn't trying to make you remember everything perfectly.
No, it's about building an external network. A self-supporting network of interconnected ideas where notes cue each other. You offload the raw memory burden.
Freeing up your brain to see the connections.
Exactly. It's about manageable, consistent effort, too. Like Anthony Trollope writing his 250 words every 15 minutes. Small chunks, done consistently, lead to massive output.
Okay, so you build this network of smart notes. Then what?
Then you focus on develop ideas. The slip box isn't just storage, it's an idea generator.
How does it generate ideas?
By showing you connections you wouldn't have seen otherwise. It reveals gaps, contradictions. It might show you you've had the same idea before, or that an idea you thought was yours actually came from somewhere else.
Pushing you into new territory.
Yes, forcing you to elaborate, to distinguish, to innovate.
And comparing notes highlights conflicts.
Right.
Yeah.
Contradictions, paradoxes, oppositions. These aren't problems. They're facilitators for insight. They force you to think deeper.
Back to Munger's lattice work.
Yes! Building that broad toolbox of mental models, learning from the experiences of others, especially when they've reflected on it and turned it into a versatile model.
Yeah, learning from failure, too. Avoiding survivorship bias.
Crucial. Like the RAF planes in WWII reinforcing where the bullet holes were would have been wrong. You need to ask about the planes that didn't come back. Where were they hit?
So look at what failed. Ask what if questions.
Exactly. Counterfactuals. Redefine the problem by considering the whole picture. The slip box helps you do that by bringing disparate ideas together.
Okay, develop ideas. Then you have to actually write the final piece, right? Share your insight.
Right. And this is a shift. Inside the slip box, it's expansive, divergent thinking. Now, for the manuscript, you need to become linear, convergent.
Narrowing focus, cutting things out.
Yes, deciding on a specific argument based on the clusters of notes you developed, and then drafting it, cutting anything that doesn't directly serve that argument.
But planning the writing process itself can be tricky. That planning fallacy.
Oh, it's a huge bias. We're terrible at estimating how long things will take.
That student study where even their worst-case scenarios were too optimistic.
Exactly. It's like experience doesn't even help us get better at estimating because the bias is so strong.
And Parkinson's law work expands to fill the time.
Right. So the antidote isn't necessarily better long-term planning. It's focusing on the process. The small, manageable tasks you can do now, driven by your slip box.
And getting that short-term feedback.
Yes. Learning from experience requires regular, short-term feedback. A rigid, linear plan doesn't give you that. A flexible, slipbox-driven process lets you adapt constantly based on what you're discovering.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Focus on the process, adapt as you go. The final step.
The final, crucial step. Make it a habit.
Because good intentions aren't enough.
Not in the long run, usually. Intentions guide immediate actions, but habits dominate over time. We tend to revert to routines.
And habits can be tricky.
Yeah.
The dark side.
Yeah, it's ironic. We often feel most in control of behaviors that are actually the most automatic, the most habitual, just because they feel familiar.
So how do you break out of routines that aren't working, especially if they feel comfortable? That sounds hard.
It is hard, and that's why this whole slipbox system can be a hard sell.
Why is that?
Well, it clashes with how universities often teach in compartments. It might seem to conflict with some learner-centered ideas if they don't provide enough structure. And crucially, when we're stressed...
We fall back on old habits. The tunnel effect.
Exactly. We stick to what's familiar, even if it's the source of the stress.
So the solution needs to feel simple, even if the underlying change is profound.
Yes. It has to appear simple to overcome that tunnel vision. This isn't just about adopting a tool, it's about fundamentally changing how you think, how you work. It's about becoming a different person with a different way of thinking.
By questioning your routines, letting your thinking grow within that network of ideas.
Exactly. Decentralizing your thinking, letting it live and breathe within the connections you build.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've seen how a system that seems pretty simple on the surface, taking and connecting notes, can, when it's part of a whole workflow, really revolutionize how you learn, think, and write. It's shifted the focus from sheer effort and willpower to building a smarter process, working smarter, not just harder, letting the work itself pull you along.
And maybe the final thought to leave listeners with is this. If Luhmann's incredible productivity wasn't really about innate genius, but about a system that let him avoid forcing himself. Then what common belief, what assumption about productivity or intelligence or how you work might you need to challenge?
That's a great question to ponder. We really hope you'll reflect on your own habits after this. Could even small changes, maybe just reading with a pen differently, or really focusing on understanding versus just consuming info, could that start to shift things for you?
Moving from struggle towards insight, maybe even flow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you from today's deep dive? What's one thing you might try applying to your own intellectual journey?
That's all for this episode of the Finglims podcast. If you found our discussion insightful, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future topics. Until next time, stay informed and make smart decisions. Goodbye.